if these Ethiopian buildings aren't the only ones that are high above the ground, then what is the basic theory for why Africans build so high? I mean, if we look at the Telem, we can see that they build on the side of a mountain or a ridge. And it's strange to see people building in this way, given that flat land is almost always a better idea. I mean, let's start thinking about Africans and where they tend to live without even considering this great architecture. For example, Zulus live on hills, and a lot of other groups, Bantu groups, tend to live on hills, high ground. They're highlanders. And this is something that is repeated. And so when we find them obsessing over the highest peaks, we should not look at it with our eyes of, oh, this is strange, but look at it as it's obvious why you would do this. It gives you so much of an advantage against your enemies, but not only that, it puts you closer to the heavens. The fear that I have about these ruins is that, let's take South Africa for example. It's so modernized that I don't know how many ruins from Africa were taken away in order to put new buildings. And so we might be seeing the ones on mountains and the ones on the side of slopes simply because they were out of the way, whereas a lot of them would have been structured somewhere in the ground. For example, if we go to the ruins in Pumalanga, this is not the Mlichohinga, this is not Great Zimbabwe, this is not Mapungubwe, this is another one that has nothing to do with those, but it looks the same because there's this stone circle culture that just somehow was spread throughout the entire Bantu region and got very expressed within the West African regions. You see, there's circles, enclosures. This is why even some of the biggest walls are these huge enclosures in West Africa, because they are focused on this type of culture and then they expand on it regionally. But usually you can tell immediately these types are strictly Bantu.
Called the Helvetia ruins. It's one of the mysteries of Mpumalanga. Spread all around us on the tops of the mountains are massive structures of dry walling that were built approximately 2,500 years ago by indigenous people who possibly, we believe, built these structures to actually protect their cattle from predators and so on. Now, the mystery of this style of building is, first of all, the numbers of these structures that actually exist in Mpumalanga. Stretched over the mountaintops right through over a very vast distance are incredible ancient villages that actually exist on the top of these mountains. To date, very little study has been done to ascertain who the people actually were. But one thing is that these were definitely indigenous people, African people, that actually built these structures, but with some outside influence. The area itself is called the Makumati, and if you go through history you will find that there are people who in actual fact called this area the Makumati because it was a gold bearing area where people in ancient times would come and actually search for gold in this particular place. The structures that surround us at this time are much bigger, approximately 15 times bigger than the Zimbabwe ruins. And the amazing thing is that the style of building is in some way depicts Africa in another form and another type of fashion. But if you go back into history and you try to understand the reasons why people would build in this particular style, it comes down to a very small and a common denominator, and that is the lack of what we call indigenous building materials, the lack of wood, and of course the lack of thatching. And on these bare mountain tops, the grass does not grow long enough for people to actually use it to thatch huts and so on. So they would have used the building materials that were available, which are these millions and millions of flat stones. Now this particular one is one of the more unique sites, and we also believe that because of the other structures that exist lower down on the plateau, that this one could have been of greater significance than the others, and possibly even to the significance of being used as an initiation site for these ancient people. At this point in time, because of the very little archaeological evidence that has been ascertained concerning these sites, it is possibly of Ndwandwe and Ndwane. It could possibly have been of Bokoni, it could have been Pedi. There's very many different language groups that could have possibly built this particular site. Until such time as archaeological evidence is in actual fact ascertained, it will be very difficult to actually place who actually built these sites. But for visitors who come here, it's absolutely amazing to see something so almost Zimbabwean in style and structure in the middle of the province of Mpumalanga. As we take a short tour through this particular site, we'll point out some of the more awe-inspiring aspects of this site. But this particular one is the Helvetia ruins and forms a very intricate part of the Highveld heritage route, which visitors can in actual fact.
Another thing he said is that it's for keeping cattle, and it might be true that they kept cattle in some of these stone circles, but a lot of these were enclosures for humans, and because that's how humans in Bantus live, they live in enclosures for some reason. And the second one is that a lot of these would have been used for rituals and stuff like that, probably more than one purpose. You can evacuate cattle and put in humans. It's not that difficult. This whole stretch, by the way, like I'm trying to show you, because I've shown you the older people who said that the kingdom of Zimbabwe, if you think about it, started all the way from the Cape all the way to even Mozambique. I want to prove to you that this is not just like, oh, there's a dotted city here, there's a dotted city. There's dotted cities everywhere, and they're just dotted all over the place, stretching. There's so many that I could not possibly mention them all. As you can tell, this video is very old, and this was one of those early confessions by Europeans of equal or maybe even underestimated populations in Africa. And even in this older version, you can tell that they're still got that, oh, they didn't have a lot of materials and stuff, when in actual fact you can tell by this that even places that had way more materials, like for example the ruins in Thimlich Ohinga or Great Zimbabwe, they look the same. They still utilize it in the same way. They just, I mean, I can't even say they're bigger, because this guy said these ones were bigger.
Takes a look at the building style of this dry walling. The most amazing thing is, out of a structure with approximately 300,000 flat stones that have been used, suddenly we come across one stone which is round. Now obviously this has got some significance to these ancient people. So what this is, again, it's a mystery. We can't understand the reasons why. This is probably a site of great significance related back to these ancient people. The height of the walls, which is more than 2.5 meters high, also shows that it was probably used as a defensive structure. And in terms of the people, would probably not a warlike people, would have in actual fact probably looked for shelter on the inside if they had been under attack. We do understand though that this particular grouping of people in this area, their end probably came during the Mfekani, which was when Shaka Zulu's impis marauded through the southern portions of Africa. We believe that this could possibly have brought these people who lived in this particular area to an end. What we do believe though is that these round stone-packed circles, the dry walling, in actual fact has got and donates quite clearly the use of dry walling as giant cattle kraals in which the indigenous people would have kept their cattle, and inside the actual structure you will find circles of dry walling which possibly donates the building of some type of structures where people would have in actual fact actually lived. The most exciting thing about this particular site is that people coming to South Africa do not realize how rich the heritage actually is, specifically in Mpumalanga, and how diverse the heritage is. Tours that come to this particular site are usually the types of people that are interested in the deep heritage of Southern Africa.
What he said about the Zulus is actually a very important one. I want you guys to remember that the Zulus are a later people. They came about later than almost any other tribe in Africa, in Southern Africa. And a lot of these Southern African tribes already had these things built into them: mining gold, trading glass, mining brass, getting salt from the waters, making cloth. A lot of these people were living in these regions and they were pushed away by the Zulus as the empire grew. And of course, the Zulus are a diverse range of people. You see, some of them were living in grass like huts, while others were living in mud brick structures. And you will see this diversity in Southern Africa, where you have three different stages of human evolution in one area, one small area.
Stone-packed circle is one of the most amazing. It is almost alien in the manner in which it has been built. The thing which many people cannot seem to understand is the reasons why the walls are so very, very, very low. We believe that this is more a symbolic circle than what it was built for any other reason. The most amazing thing about this particular one is in actual fact the door opening, which is just off to my right hand side. It is so small that you would have in actual fact had to turn sideways to in actual fact exit the particular building. This particular stone circle is built in such a fashion that people actually doubt the authenticity of the Africanness about the particular stone circle. But we believe that this is possibly the end of an initiation cycle, where initiates would have in actual fact been brought at the end of the initiation to celebrate in this particular circle, and then from here onwards would have in actual fact moved on to other symbolic happenings and occurrences that they would have been subjected to. The most amazing thing right throughout the entire world, in England and in many, many, many other places, even into the continent of Australia, you will find every continent has features very similar to these type of stone circles. The symbolism of these circles, the actual meaning of these circles, and the use of these circles is unfortunately lost in time. It is a mystery which many people do not understand fully, and until such time as a full study is done,
Something like Stonehenge is one of those where it's like, oh my God, it's so long time ago. How could we possibly know what it meant and all this other stuff? But the ones here in Southern Africa and Africa in general, Thim, Lichohinga, all of these, the sad part is that they were occupied up until the 1800s. So the messages that were not lost by accident or coincidence or anything. It was due to multiple invasions, multiple regime changes, and all these wars that forced people to abandon and stop living a certain way. This to you should prove that if Africa, so dream world right now, if Africa had just been trading with the West and the East, the Bantu regions is what I'm talking about right now, they would have gotten to the modern world. In fact, as they did, would have ushered the modern world with the rest of the world, and they would have used electricity, used all these things, and our architecture would have reflected what we once knew. The same way that you can see here, they're taking ideas from the outside. I mean, we found Chinese ornaments in some of these structures. They take things from the outside and they add and they add. And so they would have just added and added, and we would have had great cities, but they would have been in these weird, large circular formations, as you see in places like West Africa and places like that. But instead, the architecture today, I mean, I showed you that architect that was copying African architecture as a means for his personal style. But what he didn't do was copy these stone circles. He copied the straw huts and all this other stuff. It's just magnificent to think that we could have gone in one direction and we would have been wearing different clothes. We would have had completely different culture. I mean, the culture of Africa was very peaceful. I mean, I've shown you that even the people who lived under the Zulu nations commented that this was an odd time and that Shaka Zulu got killed by his own relatives because he was bringing war to the people when they wanted peace. The government of the time valued peace for their people. This would have been a great world. And even Japan at the same time. I mean, the thing that Japan did correctly was close itself off from foreigners. And we saw this epic time. We would have not even had all of that history where it's completely foreign to any other place in the world had Japan not just closed itself off to the rest of the world. In southern Africa, luckily, these areas were shut off simply by terrain and warriors who the Europeans couldn't get past. And so they were still indigenous. But imagine what the history would have been like if it remained indigenous, but fully open to trade without the fear that Europeans are coming.